As it often happens, Stanley and Helen met at work. The young people worked as managers at the same firm, and their workspace was next to each other at the office. Stanley has always been a kind and accommodating person who avoids any conflict and disputes, while Helen, on the other hand, was a very energetic and determined young lady, used to always achieving her goals. It must be true what they say about the opposites attracting in the most unexpected way. This is probably why Stanley and Helen began dating, instantly turning into a beautiful couple that turned heads on the street. By the time the young people decided to move in together, they were in a relationship for a little over a week. Living together was Helen's idea, who has always treated life with a fair amount of pragmatism. Why spend money on living in two apartments to live separately, if we can just live together and save money? Said the young woman, who immediately got the better of the compliant and quiet Stanley. A measured life and sedentary work gradually did their job. Helen was the first one to notice the increasing size of her waistline, closely followed by Stanley. But while Stanley did not see his rounding tummy as something to worry about, Helen was appalled, since it put her status as the most beautiful woman at the office into question. At first, Helen would simply make fun of Stanley, getting him to blush every time he stood on the scale. Helen's jokes actually really hurt the man, and he had a good reason for it. The fact was that since his childhood, the young man had a tendency to easily gain excess weight, and now it awoke a bunch of deeply hidden issues. But it's one thing when strangers consider you chubby, and something completely different when it's the person you love. So one day, Stanley snapped, and when Helen began to complain about being out of shape yet again, he invited her to join the gym. Stanley was very excited to have Helen agree, and so the very next day, the young people got themselves an annual membership at the gym. It should be mentioned that the very first workout together made an indelible impression on Stanley, who had very different ideas about how it would go about. The young man was embarrassed and ashamed of the fact that he looked like a fat seal compared to the fit, pumped-up regulars at the gym. On top of that, Stanley didn't actually know how to use the gym equipment and the treadmills, which also made him feel very out of place. Helen, on the other hand, quickly found her way around the gym, and soon felt there like fish in the water. That obviously had an important effect on Helen's progress, and soon her figure reflected it. Helen's excess weight literally melted before everyone's eyes, which she reminded Stanley about at every opportunity. But Stanley, despite all his best efforts and unbelievable motivation, couldn't lose even a pound. The lack of any progress and Helen's condescending attitude depressed Stanley, and it took him a lot of work to force himself to even keep trying. It was a very difficult time for Stanley, and he needed the support of his girlfriend more than ever. Unfortunately, Helen was too busy worrying about her own personal success at weight loss, and was convinced that all of Stanley's reasons and worries were simply excuses of a lazy fat man. Her attitude hurt Stanley, but he gritted his teeth and endured everything. Stanley's complacent behavior could be explained by the fact that he was a very calm man, who didn't want to fight with his girlfriend and possibly even ruin their relationship. Time went by, and Helen's insults became more painful and sophisticated, which definitely didn't help strengthen the relationship between the young people. At one point, Stanley even got the feeling that Helen was putting him down and making fun of him to make her success seem more substantial. This led to the fact that the young people virtually stopped going anywhere together. Helen always found excuses to try and leave for the gym before Stanley did. And at the gym, she acted as if she didn't even know him. Stanley understood that Helen was ashamed of him and considered him to be unworthy of being seen with her. Moreover, Helen didn't suffer from the lack of attention from other people, spending more and more time with new girlfriends and trainers. And when Stanley didn't feel like putting up with her behavior and approached her at the gym, she just brushed him off, trying to stay closer to her new friends. Stanley did whatever he could to attract Helen's attention again, but she stubbornly refused to notice him. The breaking point came when Stanley took a stand and walked out in the middle of her joint workout, hoping to shake Helen and force her to reconsider her attitude towards him. Unfortunately, Helen didn't follow him. Moreover, she didn't even pay any attention to what Stanley did, continuing with the workout as if nothing had happened. Stanley took it really hard, even though he was already used to the fact that the only thing Helen was interested in was her own body and the gym, which she now went to every day as if she worked there. The couple drifted further apart with every passing day. Helen felt exalted and didn't think that a fat guy like Stanley deserved a place by her side. Sure, Stanley realized he wasn't in perfect shape, but on the other hand, he didn't see this as reason enough to break up with someone. He believed that they could deal with any problem as a couple if they chose to. Unfortunately, Helen didn't share his views, and while Stanley was trying to revive their fading relationship, she found a new boyfriend, who ironically turned out to be the trainer from that very gym. That ill-fated evening, Helen was late from training, and Stanley decided to go pick her up. He noticed the young couple leaving the gym from a distance, but he couldn't believe his eyes at first. But then he came closer and definitely saw Helen smiling sweetly and holding hands with some handsome young man. The young people walked for a few meters and stopped at the cafe, hoping to have dinner there. Stanley was confused. He watched the happy couple for a bit and then went home. Helen came home very late that night. When Stanley asked her where she was, the girl answered sharply, "I went to have dinner at a cafe. Why? There's very tasty and healthy food there. Only you fatzos don't get it. Actually, I wanted to pick you up from the gym today, but instead I saw you with some man," Stanley added timidly. "Oh, that's my trainer. Why are you following me? And you know what? I'm tired of you. We should break up," Helen said abruptly. The next morning, she packed up her things and left, slamming the door behind her. Devastated by this news, Stanley got depressed. Using food to numb the pain, he began to eat even more, which of course immediately caused him to gain even more weight. Stanley felt like his life was over, like the world didn't have room for overweight people like him. It took Stanley a long time to realize that he was at fault for choosing to spend his life with someone who despised him and didn't value their relationship in the least. Smiling at his reflection in the mirror, Stanley realized that Helen wasn't the woman for him, and that he could think of their relationship as an invaluable life lesson. And then Stanley decided to prove to himself that he wasn't a weak-willed fat man, which Helen believed him to be, but a determined person who can achieve anything he wants. Making it his motto, Stanley went back to the gym. Only this time, he got a personal trainer who found the right way to train Stanley. As one would expect, a year of hard work and sweat gave its results. Stanley couldn't believe it when the dreaded extra pounds began to melt away before his eyes. Stanley got thinner every day, and his body was nearly picture perfect. Moreover, Stanley started to enjoy his workouts, and now they became an integral part of his new life. After the young man got into great shape, he went to study to be a trainer and changed professions. Stanley was so good at his new job that he soon had clients waiting in line to train with him. Needless to say, the young and athletic trainer became very popular, with the women attending his classes. Young women always flirted with Stanley and took selfies with him for their pages and social media. Inspired by his success, the young coach forgot all about Helen, who was so mean to him just a year ago. Thus, he wouldn't even think about their relationship if he hadn't gotten an email from his ex-girlfriend. In her letter, Helen wrote that she wanted to meet up and talk. Helen's email left Stanley indifferent, but he still agreed to meet with her at the cafe. At the cafe, Helen kept emphasizing Stanley's strong points and praising his achievements, and then she said, "You know, I thought it over, and I'm ready to get back together with you. I don't think you'd mind starting over?" After listening carefully to Helen, Stanley paused for a bit and said, "Sorry, but I want a girlfriend who wouldn't just share my victories with me, but who'd also support and motivate me during the hard times, filled with failure and uncertainty." Stanley's answer made it clear that they would never get back together. And for the first time since their breakup, Helen realized what a huge mistake she made. It's hard to say if that realization was sincere or if she was hoping to impress Stanley and get him to take her back. In any case, Stanley didn't seem to care. He was headed for a new life, full of ups and downs, but without his toxic ex-girlfriend and any self-loathing.